Our next guest thinks we've got it all wrong when it comes to helping those with mental health problems here. Dr. Pat Bracken is eminently qualified to hold such a view. He's led services within the Republic's mental health system before going on to work at Cambridge University and internationally with the UN. He's co-author of the book Rethinking the Trauma of War.
Well, we're going to throw a little bit of data at you first before we speak to Dr. Bracken. As recently as June 2021, the Northern Ireland Executive published a mental health strategy in reaction to us having the highest rates of mental health problems in the UK, with reported psychiatric problems in both adults and younger people, which were 25% higher than in GB. Now, it's affecting 1 in every 5 of us to some extent or other, and it's not new. A decade ago, a report by Ulster University suggested Northern Ireland had some of the worst rates of post-traumatic stress in the world, suggesting 1 in 4 of us could be considered as suffering PTSD in some form.
So that is the background, and with the trauma of others dominating the headlines for the last week, of course, let's have an interesting discussion about another way of dealing with trauma and mental ill health. Dr. Pat Bracken, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming, and we'll find out in a moment what has brought you to this neck of the woods. But first, set out your stall, would you? What's wrong with how we've been dealing with the trauma of the past here?
Well, it's not just the trauma of the past, Declan. I think what we focused on in mental health, if I could put it like this, is that we've seen mental health and we've characterised it as a kind of technical problem that is best dealt with by professionals of one sort or another, whether doctors, psychologists, through diagnosis and interventions, whether they be pharmacological or psychotherapeutic. We've seen it, in other words, as a technical kind of challenge. And the non-technical aspects of mental health, things to do with meanings, relationships, values, we've kind of seen them not so much as not important, but more marginal to the real work of mental health, which is about, what professionals do and how they intervene. A movement in mental health across the world now called the recovery approach says that actually when we look at the evidence about where mental health problems come from and what actually helps people, it's actually those human aspects of mental health. Things to do with relationships, things to do with meanings, things to do with values that are actually most important in terms of where our problems come from and how people are helped. So the empirical evidence points to the importance, for example, of hope and the generation of hope when it comes to any kind of mental health problem, whether that's trauma or other types of problem. And what that points us to is not that technical interventions and professional expertise, it's not that they're not important, they're very important, but actually what's more important is the generation of these, or the importance of these human aspects of mental health. And that's something that we as a community, I think, that our wider community has a much stronger and bigger role to play in terms of coming up with ideas about how we move forward.
Well, I want to just understand what you mean, because it sounds like this recovery approach would be to move this away from the medicalisation of mental health towards what you said is focus on relationships, meaning, value, hope. How do you issue that kind of help? How do you give somebody relationship help with meaning, help with value? How do you give someone hope?
Well, that's where our communities come in and the importance of community approaches. And that's why I'm up in Belfast for a meeting organised by New Script for Mental Health and Lower Namona, a festival up in West Belfast, Féile na Carraige. And that's looking at the importance of community approaches and looking to our communities for insights, intelligence about how we move forward.
Give me a hypothetical example.
Well, there's loads of them. How we generate hope, for example. What I've seen in recent years in my own neck of the woods, which is down in West Cork, are groups of women coming together to swim in the sea. And this has, what they are reporting is that this activity is something that is giving them a sense of helping them overcome things like depression, helping them overcome things like states of anxiety, moving on from being stuck in bereavement and things like that. And it's an activity that challenges you, that gets you out of your home, gets you out, and you do it in a communal space with other women, and you share and you talk and you move forward. Now, that's just one example. Other ones are gardening projects, all the creative arts. And
would you be pardon the expression, you won't like it, but would you be prescribing this kind of activity?
Well, I think what we'll have to do is it's not all or all, it's not all one thing or another, but what it is about shifting the balance. I mean, we face a crisis, as you've already outlined very clearly, in mental health, not just in this neck of the woods, but across the world. Every community is struggling with the realization that our children, that all of us have mental health is a much bigger issue for us as human beings than perhaps we have thought about. Now, yes, we need more professionalised services, and I was a clinical director in West Cork, so I fought my corner for more resources, for more staff. But I think what we're advocating for in our discussions today, and the recovery approach that I'm, if you like, promoting, is the idea that we can also, alongside of that, we can also look to our communities to involve them much more centrally in the discussions about what kind of things can come up to help people. And that it's about empowering that community imagination rather than all the time thinking, whenever we start discussing about mental health, it's just about more funding for professional services. I'm not against more funding.
So it's about being a little bit maybe more creative.
It is absolutely
with how you want to do
more
things.
Creative, yes, and about seeing, as I say, empowering our community activities to see them as important sources of strength for us. Because when you think about hope, for example, which is the most important, like as a psychiatrist for 40 years, the thing you want to help people get back into their lives when they are depressed, when they are stuck through one mental health problem or another, is hope. And help them find meaning, help them look to the future, help them find a pathway to move forward. And to do that, that's where our communities come in.
And this is a case-by-case basis, presumably, because there are some cases, I'm sure, where, and you're saying you want this to work in tandem.
In tandem,
what we're saying
yes,
is traditional.
Yeah, it's not all, or I'm not saying get rid of services by any means. I'm a doctor. I know how stuck people can be. I know the importance of medication. I know the importance of therapy. But I do think you use the word medicalisation, and that we have tended to see all of our problems, all of our emotional problems. We've started to put them into the mental health box and then see that as something that its doctors and professionals have to deal with. What I'm looking for are starting to hopefully generate, and it's not just happening here, in other parts of the world as well, communities are coming together to say, actually, we need to start thinking about what can help.
But how do communities do that? Because if I was to play devil's advocate, there may be somebody in a position of power with leverage who say, okay, I hear what you're saying, there are alternatives to medicalisation, but actually what you're describing is soft influence, it's a bit woolly, it's about hope and give people a nice time and make them feel better. I just wonder, how do you take those fairly broad concepts and package them in a way that can be delivered to the people who need it when they need it?
Absolutely, and it's a challenge. I don't deny that it's a challenge, but I think it's about actually looking at the empirical evidence. And we all want to be evidence-based these days, looking at what the empirical evidence is about how we as human beings get over mental health difficulties. And yes, for some of us, medication is very important. For some of us, therapy is important. But for a hell of a lot of people, and this is where the empirical evidence kind of stacks up.
How over-medicated are we?
I think we are pretty over-medicated, to be honest with you. As I say, I'm a doctor. I prescribe, and I have prescribed.
How did that happen, though? Is it not understanding mental health, or is it just that's the only weapon we had in the arsenal, or how did that happen?
There's lots, we don't have all day to go unpack all the issues. There's lots of them there, but I think like a lot of things in life these days, we've started to technicalize a lot of our problems as human beings, and we all want to see a neat solution with an easy answer that you can purchase or get in a prescription a kind of an easy fix, if you like. And I think when it comes to mental health problems, it's more complex than that.
A final quick point on this idea of community helping you. But what about if the community itself is fractured?
Yes, that's a big issue. But I think this is one way of actually starting to bring people together. Is because we all have mental health problems, no matter where you come from or where you've been brought up. Mental health challenges, as you said, face us all. So if we can find solutions, if one community comes up with ideas about things that might help, they can share that with other communities.
All boats rise.
It can be a way of actually bringing people together.
Thanks very much. Very interesting talking to you. Dr. Pat Bracken, the author of Rethinking the Trauma of War, but also part of the recovery approach, a different way of dealing with mental ill health, which of course we are beset with in Northern Ireland. We're not the only place, but we do have our own problems here.